So with the wildcard ending on Sunday, and the main event starting very, very soon, I'm gonna have to do a bit of a speed run to get this recap out on time. And that means we don't have much time to waste. So, let's get into it. The first round of the Swiss stage was by far the most one-sided, where we saw both African teams and both Asian teams getting swept. And OCE didn't fare much better because they both lost their series despite being able to pick their opponents. Even though in Power's case, it was between Oxygen and Team Falcons, so it would have been a pretty rough go either way. So with the Middle East winning both of their series, and then both APAC and Africa losing both of their series, South America was the region that fell right in the middle, getting one win, with Crew beating G1 by a score of 4-1, and one loss, with Team Secret falling to SSG 4-2. But with the first round of the Swiss stage being pretty straightforward, the second round got a lot more interesting. Most of the low matches went as expected. OCE matched up against Sub-Saharan Africa for 2 different matches, and even though the African teams looked pretty competitive, Power and Pioneers still got very decisive victories, as did Team Secret, who also got a 4-0 sweep over Gaming Gladiators. But in the final match of Lower Round 2, we got to see a little bit of history. G1, the European team who barely eked into the World Championship in the first place, got matched up against the APAC team Elevate. And even though an APAC team had never beaten a non-African team at LAN, a lot of people believed in Elevate to get this win. And after 6 games, that's exactly what they did. They beat G1 by a score of 4-2 and became the first team from APAC to ever beat a non-African team at LAN. And even though this team does have 2 imports, the native Japanese player Realize was definitely the MVP of this series. And after they got the win, you could see just how much it meant to him. But outside of that bit of history from APAC, the real highlights from round 2 all happened in the upper matches, because we got 4 great series. Complexity might have been the biggest favorite heading into the wildcard, but in their match against Oxygen, they barely scraped out the series win, going all the way to 7 games. And Moist was another heavy favorite for the wildcard, but in their next series, we got to see just how strong the Middle East was going to be. Because when Moist went up against Twisted Minds, they actually fell in 6 games to the Middle Eastern 3rd seed. So that team went from barely making it to Worlds in the first place, to being 1 win away from making it to the main event. And right after this, Falcons got a win over Crew in 6 games, giving the Middle East 2 teams in the 2-0 section of round 3. But they wouldn't be the only region to do that, because North America was also guaranteed to have 2 teams up there, with Complexity being locked in, and the other team would be the winner of the G2 and Space Station matchup. And while Space Station got off to a hot start, winning 3 overtimes to go up 3-1 in the series, G2 was able to turn it around, and they bounced back from the 3-1 deficit to win this series in 7 games. Round 3 is where we would see some teams' tournament officially come to an end. And in those low matches, G1 got the 4-0 sweep over Gladiators, which was followed by some pretty weird trash talk on Twitter, if you would even call it that. And the other low match saw the 2 African teams go up against each other, with Limitless taking down Valiant 4-0, cementing that they are still in fact the best African team. And after 2 sweeps in the low matches, it looked like that was going to continue into the high matches, because when Team Falcons and Twisted Minds faced off to see who would advance to the main event, Twisted Minds got out to a 3-0 lead, going on quadruple match point. But after Elevate gave us a little bit of history in the last round, Falcons decided to give us some in this round. After going down 3-0, Falcons won 4 straight games, getting the reverse sweep and becoming the first team to ever pull that off in a best of 7 at an RLCS LAN. And as an extra bonus, they also locked in their place at the main event. So after 2 sweeps in the 0-2 matches, and a reverse sweep in the first 2-0 match, the other 2-0 match looked like it was going to be a really good one, with Complexity going up against G2. But instead, it was incredibly one-sided, as Complexity's normally stout defense made a lot of mistakes that G2 was able to take advantage of on their way to a 4-0 sweep, locking in their spot into the main event as well. And for the middle matches in round 3, we quite literally saw a little bit of everything. In a best of 7, a series can either end in 4, 5, 6, or 7 games, and in the 4 mid matches we got in this round, we saw each of those results. Moist got the 4-0 sweep over Elevate, which was pretty expected even with Elevate's impressive win over G1. And then Crew and Power went all the way to Game 7 in their series. And I didn't even realize this while the match was going on, but this is the first time ever at an RLCS LAN that an OCE team played in a Game 7, which is pretty wild considering how long they've been around now. But a 3-0 victory in the final game locked up that series for the South American team. Space Station went up against Kansas City Pioneers, and in Game 2 of that series, we got our most lopsided game of the entire wildcard, with SSG winning that game by a score of 9-1, before going on to win the series in 5 games. And to wrap up round 3 of the Swiss stage, Oxygen faced off against Team Secret, and after Oxygen went up 2-1, Team Secret won the last 3 games to win this series in 6 and complete our full variety of finishes for the mid matches. Now going into round 4 and the final day of the wildcard, the first match was a fight to make it into round 5 between Elevate and Kansas City Pioneers. And at this point, Elevate had the support of pretty much the entire community. And this series against Pioneers actually followed the exact same pattern that their series against G1 did. In both of those series, they won Game 2 and Game 3, and they went into Game 5 with the series tied at 2-2. And just like they did against G1, they won Game 5 and Game 6, this time winning both of those games in overtime, and they locked in their spot in Round 5 to continue their Cinderella run. And this also marked the end of the tournament for Pioneers, meaning that Power was now the only OCE team left in this tournament. But luckily for them, their next matchup was against Limitless, where Power had a clear advantage, and they rode that advantage into the 5th round with a 4-0 sweep, eliminating the last Sub-Saharan African team in the tournament. And the last lower match of Round 4 was really spicy. We had G1 going up against Oxygen to see which one of them would be the first European team to be knocked out of the World Championship. And after G1 had taken tough losses to Crew and Elevate, it was mostly expected that they would be the team eliminated here. But instead, they put off an impressive series win in 5 games to knock Oxygen out of the tournament instead. And now after a really rough start, G1 was only 1 series away from making it to the main event. And as for the high matches in Round 4, the first 2 that we saw were pretty one-sided. Team Secret put up a fight against Complexity, taking 2 of those games to overtime, but Complexity still walked into the main event after a 4-0 sweep. And Crew had a really impressive showing against Twisted Minds, outscoring their Middle Eastern opponents 11 goals to 2 on their way to their own 4-0 sweep to go into the main event. But the best series of this entire round came in its last match, with Space Station going up against Moist in only the second and final match that we would get between a North American team and a European team for the entire wildcard. 3 of the first 4 games went in overtime, and the series went into Game 5 tied up at 2-2. But from that point on, Space Station took control of the series, winning Game 5 2-0 and winning Game 6 3-1. And with their win here, they ensured that all of the North American teams in the wildcard advanced to the main event. And now heading into Round 5, we just had 3 more matches to go, where a win would put you into the main event and a loss would send you home. The first matchup of this round was Team Secret against Elevate. Elevate was without a doubt the Cinderella story that most people were cheering for, but they definitely had their work cut out for them in this matchup. But they showed that they were up to the task, because heading into Game 4, they were up 2-1 in the series. But unfortunately, it was at this point the Cinderella story came to an end, with Team Secret showing their quality and winning the last 3 games of the series to win it in 6 games and knock Elevate out of the tournament. Even though it came to a pretty sad ending, this was still a very impressive run from Elevate, getting a win over a European team and an OCE team, and in the process, I think they gave their region just a little bit more respect within the community. The next series in Round 5 was Twisted Minds against Power, with both of these teams kinda trending downwards in this tournament to this point. Twisted Minds got off to a great start, being only 1 game win away from the main event. But after that point, they had lost 7 straight games, 3 of them to Team Falcons and 4 of them to Crew. So they would need to break that slide here if they wanted to make it to the main event. And Power had also had a pretty rough tournament, because even though they made it to Round 5, both of their wins in the Swiss stage were against Sub-Saharan African teams, which isn't really all that inspiring. But they had the chance to flip the narrative here with a win over Twisted Minds. This series was honestly very hard fought, with Game 1 and 2 going into overtime, and every game in the series being decided by only 1 goal. But even though it was hard fought, it was still clear that Twisted Minds had the edge, because in those close games, Twisted Minds won all 4, locking in their spot at the main event, and ensuring that both MENA and South America would have 3 teams in the main event. And unfortunately for OCE, this loss from Power meant that their region would have no teams in the main event. And this finishes off what's been a pretty disappointing season internationally for that region. And for the last match of the entire wildcard, we had one final European showdown, with Moist going up against G1, who was looking to reverse sweep their way through the Swiss stage. And they got off to a pretty good start towards the upset, getting shutout wins in Game 1 and Game 2. But after using the Fennec for Game 1 and then the Octane for Game 2, Joyo finally switched into the Mustang for Game 3. And after that, Moist completely took off, winning 4 games in a row to lock up the series and move on to the main event, knocking G1 out of the tournament. So now in the main event, we have 5 North American teams, 5 European teams, 3 South American teams, and 3 Middle Eastern teams. And while I'm not going to get into the discussion about major spots here, this might be the only argument that you need for the Middle East to get more spots. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because for now, we have a World Championship to play. And I'll see you all at the end. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.